welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our program Cairo Local Time, which comes your way at 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Cairo Local Time, all through from Saturday up until Thursday. I'm Dr. Ismail Bakir. I'll be joining you in this Saturday, filling in for my colleague Angie Maher. And as usual, we have a number of news updates on what's been happening across Egypt for the past 24 hours. The main segment, which is very interesting for women in sports, and how to empower women in national tournaments, and a very prominent guest who have a lot to say about this field in particular. But let's go out for the short break where you get to know how you can contact us and share your inquiries with us through the different forms of media outlets, and we'll be back. Welcome back again. Now let's take a quick recap of what's heading the news here in Egypt during the past 24 hours. We start with the most important and significant events for the day. Egypt congratulated Somalia on the election of Mohammed Abdullahi Mohammed as the new president in Somalia. Now, the foreign ministry had stated that the electing new president in Somalia had reflected the democratic experience as well as the positive developments in his country. The statement also praised the members of the Somali parliament and how they put Somalia's interests first, calling on them to support Mohammed in his quest to enforce stability and security in Somalia. In other news, the Deputy Foreign Minister Oleg Seremetov said that Moscow looks forward to the returns of the Russian tourism to Egypt. And he had added that the Russian and the Egyptian authorities in charge have been working together on carrying out all the necessary measures to improve the security at the Egyptian airports. He has also highlighted on the necessity to be able to create circumstances and mechanisms in order to avoid any similar scenarios to that of the plane crash which had occurred in Sinai in 2015. In related news as well, we have Alexander Nerdako, who is the director of the Federal Air Transport Agency, and he said that the Russian experts delegation had concluded its visit after checking all the security measures at Cairo's airports, including their significant achievements. And that was the second news. Now let's move to a third news. And Denmark has lifted their restrictions that were imposed on aviation to Egypt, especially destinations to Sharm el-Sheikh, to Dahab, and to Saint Catherine. A statement by the Denmark's embassy in Cairo on Facebook had said that the travel ban to South Sinai was lifted in coordination with other countries of Northern Europe. The decision is going to be enforced, or was rather enforced, since February the 9th, and Denmark does not ban traveling to the main destinations in Egypt, including Cairo, Alexandria, the coast of the Red Sea, of Luxor, Aswan, and South Sinai anymore. That is actually great news. On another story, Ayman Ismail, who is the chairperson of the new administrative capital for urban development, had said in a statement earlier this week that Egypt's new administrative capital had honored its agreement with the China State Construction Engineering Corporation to build the finance and ministerial district of the new capital, and tasked Egyptian contracting companies to carry out the project instead. He added that Egypt will be relying on Egyptian contractors directly to move forward with the project as they offered better prices, according to Ismail. The agreement with the Chinese company, signed in September of 2015 with an overall contract value of $2.7 billion and a 3-year construction period, had included building and financing 12 ministerial buildings, a parliament, a national convention center, and an exhibition complex. The last news we have here at the end is a young Egyptian designer. Her name is Ghada Wali, was elected as one of the 2017 Forbes 30 Under and it's a category of arts and becoming the first Egyptian woman ever to appear on Forbes' European list. It's the same list last year which featured big names including John and Patrick Collison, Maria Sharapova and Adele. The 27-year-old graduated from the German University in Cairo in 2011. She's received an MA scholarship to study at the Institute of Design in Florence, Italy. And while he joined several multinational advertising agencies, including Fortune, Walter Thompson, and she worked as a team leader at MI7 in Cairo, is leading advertising agency, who's been working also with several multinational brands. That's, of course, very good news, and more success to all the women in Egypt, especially supporting the younger generation and their potentials. That was the top stories of what's happening across Egypt for the day and during the past 24 hours. And before we start off with more segments, let's go out to the military magazine and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi attended on Thursday the 24th Educational Symposium organized by the Armed Forces Moral Affairs Administration entitled Confronting Terrorism, A Nation's Will on Al Gala Theatre. Prime Minister Sharif Ismail, a number of ministers, the Parliament Speaker, leading commanders of the armed forces, police, and a group of writers, journalists, and media professionals, university students, and students of military academies attended this symposium. During the seminar, the President has watched a documentary entitled A War of Existence on the state's efforts to combat terrorism. The armed forces honored a number of martyrs' names and praised their efforts to protect the nation's soil.
gentlemen, welcome back again to our program, Cairo Local Time, here live on Nile International. Now, the US dollar exchange rate has been continuing to decline, and in governmental and privately owned banks by 20 to 27% piastres on Thursday compared to Wednesday. The selling rate have reached at 18.05 Egyptian pounds, while the purchasing rate have reached at 18 pounds at the National Bank of Egypt, marking the 20 piastres decline from the day before. To know more about this decline and the reasons possibly behind it, we have, let's take a look at the following report.
Mohammed Muharram, Director General of the Treasury at one of the private banks operating in the Egyptian market, predicted that the Egyptian pound's rate will improve against the US dollar at the beginning of the second half of 2017. Muharram believes that the fair price of the dollar must be between 7 to 9 Egyptian pounds and might decline to from 4 to 6 Egyptian pounds by 2018 if the supporting factors of the local currency continued. Apart from the expectation, as Muharram says, there are several factors that could positively affect the price of the pound against the dollar. The factors include the group of loans that will be added to foreign exchange reserves, including a second batch worth $1 billion from the International Monetary Fund loan, 400 million from the IMF to create jobs, 800 million from the European Union, and 500 million from the African Development Bank. He added that these loans will inevitably lead to increased cash reserves of the US dollar at the Central Bank of Egypt, which will eventually lead to a decline in the dollar price against the pound. There are other factors that will be a positive impact on the rate of the Egyptian pound against the US dollar in the coming period, including the completion of certain strategic projects in the new administrative capital and the influx of some foreign investments to invest in industrial, real estate, educational and trade projects, according to Muharram. He added that the government offered tenders for 3 new areas for gold prospecting and started establishing the largest industrial zone to manufacture medicines in the Middle East and perhaps globally in the Suez Canal Area Development Project in 2017 to cover the domestic market and export, and this will also improve the position of the pound. Muharram also noted that the government has sought to increase agricultural land to cultivate basic commodities such as wheat, sugar and rice to reduce imports, which will reduce the pressure on the dollar reserve. He explained that the tourism revenues are not guaranteed because any trivial incident could entirely stop the currency resources from that sector, but he believes that the Central Bank of Egypt must return to control the dollar's up and down moves according to supply and demand through the interbank system.
To shed more light on the dollar declines, fluctuating rate, we are delighted to have joining us over the phone Mr. Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, who is an economic expert. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Ambassador. Yes, I'm sorry I can't hear you very well. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for joining us.
I hear you quite well.
Now, of course, we've seen in this report, and I'm sure that you've been, as you know, every single Egyptian has been following up on the decline of the dollar, even if it's a very small proportion of the entire decline. May you tell us the reasons why you think that decline has been taking place since Wednesday?
It was expected, of course, after the reform we took place and the devaluation of the Egyptian pound. Even the IMF, its mission in Cairo, declared that the dollar was over-evaluated. So coming back to a reasonable exchange rate between the Egyptian pound and the dollar, it is obvious that it's expected that when we paid the real market price for the dollar, many people put their revenues on the banking system. And here the result that we have surplus now, or at least and a sort of enough supply of dollars in order to cover all our needs for the time being. Mm-hmm. I expect that this will go furthermore for less and less price for the dollar as of the return of the tourism the return of the same level of the Egyptian abroad sending the transfers to Egypt, and whenever our exports is taking place to the rate it has reached in 2011.
All right, Ambassador Gamal, also, I mean, you've mentioned a few moments ago that it was an expected step for this decline to take place and that it is appropriate for the time being. And that makes me want to question does that mean that there is a plan, a short-term plan and a long-term plan that the country or the central bank in particular is following on to be able to pursue according to the fluctuation of prices? Because as citizens, that kind of decline does not really mean anything to us. Prices are still on the increase and, you know, things are the same as they are. So when would that long-term plan, succeeding the goals that are expected for the time being, as you've mentioned, will be able to be felt by each individual citizen in Egypt?
Yes, good question. And I repeat that we were expecting the decline of the dollar again. Even more decline will take place in order to have a sort of equilibrium relation between the pound and the dollar.
All right.
Of course, the citizen, as you said, cannot feel these changes because it's too short. I mean, if we want to see its reflection on the prices, we have to wait until we use the new rate of exchange in order to buy our imports. This would take at least 1 month until we make new contracts for our imports. But we have to believe in our economy. We have to believe that we are on the right track. The only problem that this remedy, we used it 2 years late. We came 2 years late. That is why the results are exaggerated, whether up and down. And we have to accept this until we come back to reason and to come back to a real economic equilibrium.
All right, Mr. Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, you're an economic expert. We'd like to thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us and for your, of course, important input for our program. We're going to go out for a touristic magazine to know more about the beautiful, significant touristic areas in Egypt. And when we come back, we'll be kicking off with the main segment. Please stay tuned.
In the arched corridor beneath the walls of the Manial Palace in Cairo, where the Hunting Museum is located, curators, restorers, designers, and workers are all racing against the clock to reach the deadline for the museum's reopening. Armed with yellow helmets and gray gloves, workers are putting the showcases in position, while restorers with their white gowns and technical tools are installing a skeleton of a camel that once transported the Kaaba cover, a vast piece of embroidery from Cairo to Mecca in the early 1900s. Ilham Saleh, head of the museum's department at the Ministry of Antiquities, said that the Hunting Museum was scheduled to be officially reopened in mid-February during the midterm school holiday after a decade closure. She said that when Manial Palace was officially inaugurated in 2013, after restoration work, the Hunting Museum was not among the halls that were open to public. Last month, with a budget of 140,000 Egyptian pounds provided by the historic Cairo Rehabilitation Project, the museum's department began the renovation and restoration of the museum in order to open it to the public during the mid-term holiday. The museum displays reserved animals, birds, and skeletons from the collection of former King Farouk and Prince Muhammad Ali Tawfiq and Yusuf Kamal collected during their hunting trips. Salah said that the among most beautiful and unique collection on display is the butterfly collection of Prince Muhammad Ali Tawfiq, the former owner of Manial Palace, adding that the collection consists of 7,000 butterflies. Salah said that Sameh Al-Masri, the designer of the museum's galleries, has brought the aura of the jungle into the galleries of the hunting museum, adding that the roar of lions, sound of chickens, screech of eagles, the elephants would echo on the audio system. Visual effects would be used to suggest something of the ambience in which the objects as display were collected. The museum was inaugurated in 1963, closing in 2007 for restoration. Two ancient Egyptian artifacts carved in glass were recovered after being handed over to the Egyptian embassy in London. Both objects were stolen and illegally smuggled out of the country. Shaban Abdelgawad, the Supervisor General of the Antiquities Rehabilitation Department, said that both artifacts depict human faces. The first one was stolen from the storehouses of Al-Qantara East City after being damaged and looted amid the security vacuum following the January 2011 revolution. The second was stolen from Al-Sheikh Ibada site in the upper Egyptian city of Minya. Abdelgawad said that with the return of these two objects, Egypt has in total recently recovered 4 items, and he continued to explain that the first was a limestone relief that was stolen from Queen Hatshepsut's temple in El Dir el-Bahari in Luxor, and it was chopped off a wall and illegally smuggled out of the country. The relief was stolen from the temple in 1975 and resurfaced earlier this month at a small auction hall in Spain, where it was bought by a British antiquities dealer.
هنا القاهرة. 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 هنا القاهرة. هنا القاهرة. وحبيبي أنا دمني ما يروح بيكون جنبي. هنا القاهرة. هنا القاهرة. عيني على أهل كايرو لبطبنها من يسايرو الكل عامل مثالي ونسلم في بعض عالي. هنا القاهرة الساحرة آسرة الهادرة الساهرة السافرة السافرة. اللي لك حبيب بيحبك وتحب تهديه بهدية هاتوا مصر الحليوة يقول لك دي صحيح هي أم الدنيا. هنا القاهرة. القاهرة ونيلنا وكلنا وأغانينا ومواويلنا وحكاوينا يا جمالنا. القاهرة تجيلنا تحن لنا. Take me back to Cairo, beside the river Nile. My heart belongs to Cairo, oh Cairo, where I have found my smile.
Welcome back again to our program, Cairo Local Time. And, it's very inspiring when we see women being dominant in so many different fields and how they prove that they have potentials and that they capable of acquiring and achieving success and facing challenges, just like men, unlike how they perceive women. Well, that also applies in sports, believe it or not. I mean, no longer are certain sports only taken by women, and they'll say, well, you can't do that, so you'd rather go play gymnastics, something that is nice and soft like ballet, but actually they can be dominating certain sports. And today we have a woman who's actually being in charge of a national team office, and she's going to be sharing her experience and tell us more about how women have been able to dominate and challenge men in certain sports. And we're very much delighted to have joining us here in the studio this afternoon Mrs. Ines Mazhar, who is the media officer of our national team. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you.
It's very interesting and inspiring, and I must say that there must be a lot of barriers and obstacles that women would face to be able to prove themselves in anything, basically speaking,
exactly,
in the world today,
sports.
unfortunately. But let's talk about sports, because that's something interesting, because usually it requires certain physical fitnesses, muscles, things that women, or men believe women are not able of doing. So tell us a little bit about your position that you run.
Well, actually, as you have mentioned, I'm the media officer of the Egypt national team, football national team. Just claimed the second place. They were runner-ups to Cameroon in the final of the Africa Cup of Nations. But originally, I'm head of the sports department at Al Ahram Weekly newspaper. So I've been working in sports journalism for a long, long time. And while working there, I've been also working or contributing with different national federations and international federations, especially handball and FIFA. I've been working with them within the media departments and as media officer as well. And I've participated in several in the Olympic Games, World Championships, World Cups. So I have lots of experience, but in terms of sports media, not like an athlete. So it doesn't require fitness here.
Yes, but it requires a lot of work, and that's and there are many difficulties that are being faced.
Of course.
Maybe that's what I would like to ask you about. What kind of difficulties have you faced during your coverage, or the difficulties that you have covered about certain women athletes who have faced, or who have faced certain circumstances?
Well, usually, the most important part is that, of course, there are so many difficulties, and I've faced lots of difficulties since my beginning.
Such as?
But, like, for example, you are in a completely male-dominated field, sports, whether the ones who are playing or the ones who are working there. So, like,
what are you doing here?
Yeah, what are you doing here?
And
go
this is really
home,
strange.
go get married.
I face this personally speaking.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Kung Fu player, and nobody would have imagined that I actually play Kung Fu, But that's the thing. And if you want to show, like, don't bother me because that will be provoked, like, you can't do
Why
anything.
not? Give me the chance. So the point here, yes, but I just used to ignore all these remarks and just go on my way. And every time I progressed and I became more successful even than many of my male colleagues. This is really very important. I mean, it's until you convince them, and you convince them with your own capabilities, your potentials, so they believe in you and they have faith in you and in what you are doing, and now they're supporting.
I would like to talk about the psychological differences. Do women and men face that jealousy kind of challenge that you usually see between women? But allow us to go out for this short report where we see about the 10 most successful women who were dominant in the field of sports, and they had proven their success, and we'll be returning back to get to know more about this rather very interesting and exciting position for women.
Although the advancement of gender equality is often thought of as a modern phenomenon, it's actions of a much earlier generation of women that started this advancement and made possible the changes we see today. It was the influential actions of this group of pioneering Egyptian women who chose to conquer male-dominated fields and succeed at a time when women remained in the shadows of society that changed history not just in Egypt but across the Arab world. Samira Musa was a prominent nuclear scientist and the first Egyptian woman to hold a university post after obtaining a PhD in atomic radiation from Cairo University. Musa was a strong advocate for peaceful use of nuclear technology and spent her life working on making medical use of this technology affordable. Meanwhile, Doria Shafiq was one of the leaders of the women's rights movement in the 20th century, and it's because of her work that Egyptian women were granted the right to vote by the Egyptian constitution. Latifa Nadi was the first Egyptian woman to become a pilot and the first Egyptian woman to fly a plane solo from Cairo to Alexandria. And Nadi was friends with Amelia Earhart and inspired many other women of her generation to attend flying school and become pilots as well. Nabawiya Musa was a writer and a pioneer in women's education in Egypt, as she was the first Egyptian woman to receive a high school diploma and then went on to become the first Egyptian woman to teach Arabic and the first female inspector at the Egyptian Education Ministry. Helena Sidaros was the first Egyptian woman to become a doctor after she returned from studying in London to work at the Kitchener Hospital in Cairo. Sidaros later opened a private clinic specializing in obstetrics and gynecology. Huda Sha'rawi is considered the pioneer of gender equality in Egypt and the Arab world, as she led the 20th century women's rights movement in Egypt. Suhair al-Qalamawi was the first Egyptian woman to attend Cairo University and the first Egyptian woman to obtain both a master's and PhD for her work in Arabic literature. Aisha Abdurrahman was an influential writer who was the first woman to lecture in Al-Azhar University and the first Egyptian and Arab woman to win the King Faisal's International Prize and one of the first Egyptian women to work in journalism, especially in Al-Ahram newspaper. Tahani al-Gibali is the first Egyptian woman to be appointed a judge, and she is also the former vice president of the Supreme Constitutional Court of Egypt, which is still the highest ever judicial position to be obtained by a woman of Egyptian history. Malak Hifni Nasif was a prominent writer and scholar in the 20th century, advocating for women's advancement alongside Huda Sha'rawi, but Nasif's writings focused on Islamic modernism instead of Western feminism.
Welcome back again, and we're still joined in. Very much delighted to have Mrs. Ines Mukhtar, who is, Mazhar rather, I'm sorry about that, who is the media officer for our national team. Now, before we move on about how you perceive and have covered the national teams, I'm still very interested and curious to know from you about that jealousy, challenging perspective between men and women when it comes to sports. Is it found that kind of, friction is found very clearly and obviously from your coverage between men and women?
No, I don't think it's in sports like other fields. I mean, it's different in sports. But for example, but sometimes, like, they feel you are taking an advantage from them. Like if you are in a press conference, you are awarded to ask the first question. And sometimes you would be given the final question. And it happened to me once in an international press conference. And they said, this is the last question. And I was there, and there was another colleague, I don't remember from what country. And we both raised our hands, and then they gave me the floor to pose my questions. So like he was very angry and so disappointed, and even afterwards he said, well, your question didn't deserve to be the final, the last question. I should have
So you felt
asked.
it was more of a male
yes, he
women
underestimated
kind of
my question. He tried, so it sometimes happens, but it's in very rare occasions, and it also depends on the character and the personality of whoever you are working with. I mean, in my position, lots of my male colleagues, they support me and they are happy with how far I have gone, especially in football. Because in football, I'm a media officer of the national football team. I also write about football. I'm a member of the jury that selects the FIFA Football Player of the Year.
Wow,
so
that's
nice. so they thought,
are you the only woman?
I'm the only woman
Okay.
among 96 male journalists. They are all men from
And how's
different
the experience?
countries.
I mean, do they go with
I've
your
been-
decisions and your opinions?
Yes, I've been a jury member for the past 10 years, and until now I'm there. Every year they send me the nominations for me to vote. So I believe that if they thought that I don't understand football or that I'm not up to this responsibility, I wouldn't have continued. But like this is the 10th year, and I'm a member of the jury of the selection of the World Football Player of the Year.
Yeah, speaking
and
of
coach
selections,
as well.
and but let's move to basketball, which is actually Egypt, the first African country that is hosting the under 19 players for the basketball cup. So how do you perceive that as a sport journalist, doing this kind of work for long years? If you were to put a headline or to cover the most important aspects of this kind of tournament, what would you be looking for?
Well, I'd be looking for, of course, I mean, it's a very good opportunity for women's sports in Egypt. I mean, to host a world championship in Egypt for basketball and for women, this is something, I mean, it's an advantage for Egypt. I mean, and Egypt became the host nation after beating Italy and Latvia and Israel for being awarded to host it here and become the first the first country to host the championship on an African soil. So I think this is a great achievement, and I believe this is an opportunity for women's sports and Egyptian basketball, especially to develop and show more progress. And I hope that, I mean, yes, we are in a tough group, but I hope that our ladies would be able to qualify to the next rounds and reach the final stages of the competition. And what we hope is that also youngsters or the new generation of women basketballers, these are the under 19, you have the under 17 and you have under 15. So I call these ladies, these young girls, to go and watch and from the clubs, so they can make it a full house stadium in the first place, and then they can learn from the
And
others.
you mentioned the youngsters, the new generation being under 19 and under 16 as well, which requires you to, you know, by nature be in school. How do you assess the academic schools in terms of, shedding more light on importance on sports and sports activities, choosing students that would be qualified or who would have the potentials in different forms of sports? We've seen some international private schools in Egypt who had selected and they took soccer for women very seriously,
exactly.
and the media started shedding light on it, they started propagating them, and now we know that Egypt has a women soccer team players, which again is a kind of sport that you don't really hear about this part of the world, at least.
Yeah, no, but we have this team. They have been since 1998 when we started participating at the first African Women's Championship in 1998, and it is affiliated to the Egyptian Football Association. It is there, but there are no
girls.
as
I mean,
you
what to
mentioned,
say? Imagine if I had a brother say, "I'm going to go play football."
yeah.
That's very odd.
The
to
point
hear.
is, even when these girls go and play, you don't find women supporters. This is the point. You would find women supporters going to watch boys and men
or
playing
boys who would
football
come to
and
watch
support
girls out of
it.
having crushes,
exactly,
but not really of
exactly. But
sort
what
of
we need here,
supporting them
whether
for the
it's
field.
in football or in basketball, what we need here is for the women, for the girls to go and support their women. Also, in my case, for sports journalism, I call all our media presenters, TV presenters, radio announcers, all female sports journalists to go and participate and shed light on this tournament, because, to be honest, it might not take the same coverage in the media, just like if it was an under 19 men's basketball championship. Definitely, it wouldn't take the same coverage or the same attention. I mean, this is something by nature, but then you have to keep on going and keep moving on until, I mean, there will be time. Yeah, we'll reach the point.
Yeah, I really want to ask you, I mean, through your field and your career that is specialized in sports coverage, do you only focus on women's sports? Do you focus on sports in general? If it's sports in general, how do you see international tournaments, whether it's in soccer or in any field that gathers a continent like the African Cup of Nations or Egypt's participation with international tournaments, that kind of merge? Because usually they say sports is that kind of soft diplomacy that could unite ties together.
Of course, it's very
How far
important.
is this true? And it can also break ties, by the way. And
Exactly.
we've seen
It
that
happened before,
as well through the years.
Experiences, yes, have shown that.
How have you been assessing that kind of aspect throughout your field?
Well, we all in media, we all try. Of course, you have it's not a policy, but this is how it goes all over the world. I mean, football is the #1, the most popular sport. And because media depends also on advertising, and advertisers want the popular sports like football, like in the US, for example, baseball, basketball, rugby, American football. We don't have such sports here. But here in Egypt, football is #1. So first it comes football, and then the other sports like basketball and handball.
Yes,
football is soccer. Yes,
yeah, it's not the
football
same
is soccer.
perception.
And then comes women's sports. So and if other sports, male sports, they suffer from football. So what do you expect from women? So you try to, as you mentioned, to merge, but then you have advertisers. Sometimes they control the newspapers or they control the media outlets. And no, we want football. We want more about football in order to put our ad in here. So sometimes it's out of your hands. You can't help it, but as much as you can.
Yeah, of course, as much as you can. And then I'm going to raise this to my mind the question of the fact that as a woman, do you have a say? Do you have this kind of different analytical angle when it comes to evaluating performances of football players? For example, like yesterday's match. Everybody on social media had something to say about it. And of course, Egyptians, how they have this sense of humor and they turned everything into a joke. And, you laugh at it for a while, but then if you really want to think about it from a journalistic perspective, do women have the final touch and say? I mean, do they notice these tiniest things that males might not be aware of that contribute strongly to the political analysis?
Yes, it happens, and sometimes.
Like, how do you read yesterday's match, for instance?
Well, yesterday's match, it's because I have been accompanying the national team in Gabon for the past month during the Africa Cup of Nations. I sort of predicted how the performance is going to be.
Now, how far correct was it?
It was correct, and everybody said so. I mean, first of all, most of the players who were among the national team from Al Ahly or Zamalek, as we have seen yesterday, everybody said that the performance was. So whoever watched the game and also those who gave the analysis after the game, they believed that it was the same performance or the same touch of the national team when they used to play, and mainly depending on defending. So you played for a scoreless draw, and it ended with playing penalty kicks in order to decide the winner.
Yeah, I need to ask you another question. I'm not really a football fan. I'm a kind of sports fan since Kung Fu ended for me years back. Is it true? I mean, have you ever noticed when Egyptians, they start off really well in any kind of sport, that's when you put your hand on your heart and say, okay, they're not going to make it.
Yeah.
Or am I just the only one? Are we like usually the last minute people who would score and turn up surprises? When you start with all the confidence and the full boost, then that's where you have to worry as a viewer or as a journalist for sports.
Well,
how this will end?
Sometimes, of course, you have to worry because it's always a risk. The last-minute goal, it's always a risk. Why? Because it's something, I believe, it's in the genes of the Egyptian sports men and sports women as well. We have a huge problem about physical fitness. We never, we are always far behind other teams.
We never take healthy lifestyle very seriously.
Of course, so this doesn't help us. So if you depend on snatching a last-minute goal, it's luck. I mean, it happened for us twice in the tournament, at the Africa Cup of Nations against Uganda, and also later against Morocco in the last 2 and 3 minutes. But then it happened to us against Cameroon.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting interview, and it definitely deserves a lot more time. And of course, we'll be very happy if we have you here with us some other time to talk more specifically about. I'm sure you're like an encyclopedia of coverage. I would like to know more from you on. We're very much delighted to have joining you. Thank you very much once again, Mrs. Ines Mazhar, who's a media officer for our national team. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our episode of Cairo Full Time. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen.